Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns have had 7 training camp practices, and boy, is there plenty to discuss. The quarterback competition remains undecided. Kenny Pickett is hurt, and Shedeur Sanders is yet to take a first-team rep. Jordan Hicks retired, and Martin Emerson Jr. ruptured an Achilles tendon. Meanwhile, Carson Schweitzer keeps turning heads. And the Haslams talked to reporters about the team and the Dome Stadium. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. Hey, Chud.
Hey, Scott. So nothing's going on. Nothing at
Nothing.
all.
Nothing.
I know. I feel bad. I had a little vacation, so I left you hanging there for a little bit. So we normally probably would have done one a few days ago. But hey, this is good though because they're off today, and now everyone can kind of catch up on everything that's happened. We'll get your great insight on it, and that will get us into. I mean, hey, listen, football's back tonight, Thursday, Hall of Fame game in Canton. So that's exciting. I mean, even though you barely see any starters early on in the preseason, there's just something about that first game. It signals that it's back.
I do. It's crazy that there's a game on TV tonight. I can't say that I'll watch a ton of it because I don't think any of the starters are going to play. But it's still cool. It means we got football, like you said. We get the Hall of Fame festivities this weekend, and it was on my list, so I might as well hit it before we get going. Chud is a colleague of both of ours. We used to do TV together, the three of us. Mary Kay Cabot gets the Bill Nunn Award and goes into the Hall of Fame this weekend. So I'm really excited about that. I'm planning to go down to Canton on Friday night when she gets the award and gives her speech. Well deserved. So that adds something to this week, and I'm really excited for that. And she's well deserved for Mary Kay.
Yeah, yeah. Congratulations to her. I know how close a lot of you guys are on the beat. So that's got to be exciting for everybody that covers the Browns. And I mean, listen, every Browns fan knows who Mary Kay Cabot is. Like you mentioned, we've worked with her on TV, and a lot of good memories of doing TV work together. So yeah, it's exciting. Congratulations to her for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, but then Chud, like you said, we haven't talked since the start of camp. Where do you want to get going? There's so much to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think you can start in a lot of different directions. I mean, you could start with Junkins, you could start with the Haslams
Right.
talking, you could start with the injuries. You could start with a lot, but I think you got to start with what everyone focuses on the most, and that's the quarterbacks. And the big thing there is, we do have a little bit of news there. It's not just opinion and who's done this or that. It's you actually have some meat there with the injury. And how much does Pickett getting hurt change this quarterback race if it does at all, Scott?
It depends how long he's out, Chud. If he's out 2 weeks, I think it's hard for him to win the job. If he's only out these 3 days, right? He missed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're taping this Thursday, so he's off. The team isn't practicing today, and then they're back Friday. If somehow he was back Friday, um, then I don't think it's that big a deal. You talk to people with the team, and even Jimmy Haslam mentioned it that they thought Kenny Pickett had gotten off to a strong start in training camp. I saw bits of that. I don't know. Like, I don't think he was like way ahead of Joe Flacco or anything. We saw him make some plays. One thing that separates him from Flacco and could be a big factor in the decision is his mobility. The fact that, he's able to extend plays. We saw one play during training camp where, and it's hard because you can't touch the quarterback, but it really felt like the line opened up and he found a seam and then he ran, for like 50 or 60 yards down the middle. So that's an element that the Browns appreciate and they like that Kenny Pickett has. Now, if the hamstring injury takes some of that away, that's a negative for Pickett. So, I think this is a good opportunity for Joe Flacco to get more reps, for Joe Flacco to push ahead. And I think Joe's been fine. I don't think Joe's been, it's not like he's completing passes left and right or the team's marching up and down the field. I think it's just solid in what you'd expect from Joe Flacco. So right now, I don't think the Pickett injury has changed the landscape of the competition, but the longer he's out, then I think it does.
Yeah. How does Shador look?
Chud, it's such an interesting situation and dynamic. And obviously, all kinds of people paying attention to this, and we know what kind of interest Shedeur draws on social media. Um, he looks good throwing the ball. He always has since he's gotten here, and I don't think that's going to change. Where the quote unquote issues are with Shedeur Sanders, I think it's still a little bit slow as far as decision making, even getting the ball out of his hands. I feel like when there's the quick hitting passes, whether it's a swing or a hitch, it feels like a half a beat slow. But when the play is longer developing and it's longer down the field, then I feel like it's in rhythm. It's more in rhythm, and he throws those balls better. So he throws a good ball. I think he's getting better at the pre-snap stuff that you have to do. Moving them, setting the motions and getting the guys in aligned and ready to go for the snap. Um, I think he's getting faster in the decision making and even in his movements, but it's not there yet. So, the Browns haven't given him any first team reps. On Wednesday, he got his first reps against the first team defense. He was with the second team offense. So that's a step toward, getting to the number one reps and maybe even having a chance. But I just think they realize that he's still a ways away and they're not going to rush it. And they want him to get, let's call it the fundamentals down and learning how to call a play, which he never did at Colorado, and getting guys lined up, which he didn't have to do at Colorado. Get those basics down before they really add more to his plate. And that makes sense to me, but it still would be fun and kind of interesting to see what he would do with Jerry Jeudy or David Njoku.
Where do the four quarterbacks, as we've done, and everyone in every Browns fan and everyone who talks quarterbacks like to rank them 1 through 4. Where does Petrak have it right now?
Yeah, I mean, my ranking would be Flacco, Pickett, Sanders, Gabriel. I think the Browns, I think it's really close between Pickett and Flacco. Given the injury, I'll give Flacco just the narrowest of edges over Pickett. And then I think it's Gabriel, and then I think there's a gap to Sanders in the Browns' eyes. They drafted Gabriel in the third round for a reason. They like him. I think he's gotten better as we've gotten into camp. But I still have questions about him. And they're giving him some work with the ones. Like, they want to see if he can be ready. Because there's decisions to be made, Chutter. We'll talk about this more as we get through camp. But whether they keep 4 quarterbacks. And to me, the decision whether to keep 3 or 4 is solely based on if Dillon Gabriel can be ready to be your top backup in week 1. If you feel like, whether it's Pickett or Flacco, starts against the Bengals and gets hurt, can you go with Dillon Gabriel? And if you can't, if you don't have any comfort level there or confidence, then you got to keep both veterans. And I really think they'll keep both rookies. And that's how you end up with 4 guys. But if Gabriel shows you, hey, he can come in and he can step in and fill that void, even though you prefer the veteran to be your starter, then I think they try to trade one of the veterans, whichever one doesn't win the starting job.
So you've had Gabriel at 4 pretty much in your ranking, in your opinion, this whole time. Nothing you've seen in person now up close in camp has changed that opinion for you?
No, I think Gabriel's gotten better, but I just think Shedeur has thrown it better. Obviously, I like Shedeur's height and size better than I do Gabriel. I don't think it's Sanders night and day ahead of Gabriel, and I think that's changed. I think Gabriel in my rankings has closed the gap on Sanders because I think Gabriel's gotten better. But I still have him forward. I just still have serious doubts about whether or not he can succeed at this level at his size. And the Browns don't have those same concerns, which obviously is why they drafted him at number 94.
Is there anything that anyone has said, Scott? You got to read the tea leaves, find little hints here or there. Is there anything that any coach or player or anyone in the front office, the Haslams, anyone has said that gives you a hint to, what direction they feel they want to go?
Yeah, I think the Haslam, or Jimmy Haslam in particular, and quarterback coach Bill Musgrave, both were highly complimentary of Kenny Pickett. Musgrave said he had a stellar first 2 days. Haslams said nobody wants to be on this team more than Kenny, and I'm paraphrasing, he got off to a really strong start. So that makes me think that they would prefer Pickett to be the starter.
Okay. So we're going to talk all about what the Haslams had to say, what Jimmy had to say as this goes on. So I want you just to talk about what the Haslams had to say in reference to quarterbacks here. Let's save everything else for later. But I do want to hit on a couple things when it comes to quarterbacks. And he basically said he was not the one that said draft Shedeur. He is saying that was Andrew Berry's call. Is that right?
That's exactly right, Chud. That'd been lingering out there
since. Do you buy it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lingering out there since the end of April. I do buy it. I do. Now, he also left the door open for there were organizational discussions. He said when they left Friday, they didn't think Sanders was going to be a possibility. And, I heard some people trying to read into that. I forget what radio thing I was listening to. But to me, they drafted Gabriel on Friday, right? So you don't think you're going to draft two quarterbacks. So that's part of it. They also thought Sanders would probably go early Saturday on the third day of the draft. So I don't think that was hey, we don't want Shedeur now. It was, they already got the rookie quarterback. And then as Saturday went on and they had discussions, it was, okay, well, if Shedeur Sanders keeps falling, when's the right spot to go get him? And then they wind up trading up to 144 and drafting him there. So I don't think, I think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski always liked Shedeur Sanders to some degree. And I think most of the decision makers, I don't know if it's a consensus, but I think they agreed that at 144, it was great value. I don't believe that Haslam stepped in and said, okay, you have to make the move and go get Shedeur Sanders because he's going to add so much buzz to this organization. I believe him when he says that's not how it went down. But it was the first time we talked to Jimmy since the draft, so it was important to get that on the record.
Now, did I hear this and read this correctly that Jimmy said that both rookies need to play in games this year? Is that, or did I see that out of context, or is that right?
Yeah, I asked him if, given the fact that they have 2 first-round picks in 2026, and it's supposed to be a deep quarterback class, do you need, I don't know if I said how important is it to see these rookies, or do you need to see these rookies play in games? And he said, absolutely, absolutely, I believe was the quote. And then he went on to talk about it, how it's a discussion in the building all the time. So whether or not he meant exactly that yeah, he need to see these guys in games in October, November, December, which steps on Kevin Stefanski's toes a little bit, which Jimmy doesn't want to do. You know that's an organizational talking point, and it's just a reality that they would be better off as an organization if they got to see these 2 rookies in games. Now, if Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco is 8-1, then you don't make that decision. But I think it's the backdrop that hangs over everything this season. And I think Jimmy just said, I don't know if it's quiet part out loud, right? That people like to say these days. I just think he acknowledged the reality of the situation.
Well, but still, though, Scott, are you a little bit surprised by that? Because then that gets people talking about how, well, all right, Haslam says this is the way it's got to be. That's the owner getting involved. And what if the other quarterbacks are doing a great job and then he feels the pressure to have to put in the rookies to see what he has there? And these are things that a lot of fans and media will speculate on, but this is like the owner just pretty much outright saying it.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Chud. It was a big deal. I really debated, was that going to be my headline? And then I wound up going bigger picture, but I thought it was really newsworthy. Kevin Stefanski said, oh, I'm not even there. We're in July. Let's not talk about that, when he got asked about Haslam's comments. But I think it's really newsworthy. I think it's significant. Now we have to see how the season plays out, and does it wind up working out that way? Does it mean you only have to see Dylan Gabriel? Does it mean you have to see both guys? I mean, those are questions we're going to be asking as soon as this season looks like, okay, they're not going to be a playoff team, right? Like those discussions could happen as soon as week 4 or 5, depending how the season starts. So yeah, Chud, it's huge, matzo ball hanging out there to borrow from Seinfeld that, hey, you got these rookies, you got these 2 first-round draft picks next year, you got to figure it out.
Yeah, it's one thing to think it, but to hear it, and usually when stuff like that gets said, it makes pretty big headlines. Do you feel like it got a lot of headlines nationally and even on radio shows and this and that? Because I didn't hear a ton about it.
No, it's probably because there was so much in
Yeah.
that interview. You had the stadium stuff. I know Zach Jackson from The Athletic, a good buddy of mine. He had a headline that was about that quote right there. So, yeah, maybe some people just thought, hey, that's the reality. But I'm with you, Chad. I thought it was a big deal that he said it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think any other time that would have been a bigger deal. Maybe 2 months ago or where there's not much going on, that would have been a huge talker. And then to wrap up the quarterback talk with the Haslams, he had mentioned the future with Arch Manning, right?
Yeah, that was an early question. There's reports out there that, the Browns are trying to get Arch Manning coming out of the draft next year, and we know that the Haslams, especially Jimmy, has a connection to Peyton Manning from the University of Tennessee. He's consulted Peyton on a number of things, and Peyton is Arch's uncle. So there's that obvious connection there. The Browns need a quarterback. Arch is supposed to be really good. But Jimmy said he does not know Arch and that he thinks he's going to stay in college for more than this year, so it's irrelevant.
So Scott, what would have you started with when I hit you with the quarterbacks? Would have you done that, or would have you gone a different direction?
No, I think I would have gone quarterbacks, Chud, just because it's the main thing that they're dealing with. And I was thinking about, okay, what am I going to do for my season preview stuff? Which is, I know it's a month away, but I started to think about that the other day. And once you get outside of this quarterback situation, there's always stuff to talk about. I'm not saying that. But the interest level at quarterback and the uncertainty at quarterback dominates. I feel like everything else across the roster, we know most spots. We can talk about running back and receiver, and obviously those are discussion points. But I feel like it's all about the quarterback. So I think I would have started there too, Chud. My other thought would have been the Haslams' approach to this season. They mentioned panic, impatience, and how they're handling their expectations of the season, what it means for Stefanski and Barry. It's a little broader, bigger picture, but that would have been the only other area I would have considered.
Well, let's go right there then, as that would segue perfectly because we just talked about the Haslams with the quarterbacks, and a lot of what Jimmy had to say and a lot of the headlines were around the quarterbacks. But let's move on to that broader stroke now. And one thing that stood out to me is he talked a lot about his trust still in Barry and Stefanski.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, he's walking a line there, Chud, because it's, he says he's supportive of them. And when they went 3-14 last year, they got together and they said, this is not going to be a quick 3-14 up to 14-3. Like, there's going to be some growing pains here, and the roster needs to get younger, and they didn't have any salary cap space, and they don't know what they're going to do quarterback, and it wasn't a great offseason to find a quarterback. So they want to be realistic about that and supportive of Barry and Stefanski, who the Haslams, since day one, have really liked, and they like that they're the people out front in their organization. But you have to balance that with you can't go 3-14 again. And Jimmy said that. He goes, 3-14 won't cut it. And everybody knows they have to be better. Andrew and Kevin and me and Dee, and he went through everybody. So you have this sense that, yeah, it's not going to be easy, and this is we're in an early stage of this process, but we can't go 3-14 again. So I think as much as he wants to support Barry and Stefanski, If they go 3-14 again, and I think it's just the reality of the NFL, they probably get fired. So I just find that really fascinating. So it's yes, they're going to be supportive, and they don't know who their long-term quarterback is, but you got to be better. And we've given you enough pieces to be better. And we're paying Myles Garrett a ton of money and Denzel Ward a ton of money. This is all the subtext. So yeah, there's going to be a grace given to Barry and Stefanski, but only so much. And I thought Jimmy was pretty clear about that. And, we're not going to panic. And, it's going to be about building through the draft. So that's the big picture view they're taking. But you can't get away from the on-field results. And coming off 3-14, they need to win more games. And he said, we'll know what better looks like. And he didn't want to put a win total on it. But to me, you probably got to get to 5 at least. I think 7 wins, it's a slam dunk. Everybody comes back. But I think there's a gray area in there. And part of it is, okay, you only won 5 games, but you got to see what Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders could do. Or you saw Shadur Sanders develop into an NFL quarterback or whatever that looks like. But it starts with winning more than 3 games.
You wonder if Haslam, if he had any idea when he bought the Browns, if he knew how. I mean, you kind of know, but like you sense when you listen to him now, like how difficult he realizes it is to be an owner of an NFL team, and also not that he's cocky or arrogant, but it almost seems like you kind of hear him say some things sometimes that makes you think he realizes that he's made mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's been a theme since early in the ownership. And now we're going on, year 13 or 14.
Incredible.
Yeah, he says, yeah, we learned the hard way, made plenty of mistakes. I mean, I don't know if he regrets the firing and hirings that they did at a rapid pace early. I'm sure that they regret who they hired. I don't know if they regret that they churned through those people so fast. But yeah, I think, I don't know if embarrassed is too strong, but I kind of feel like they're embarrassed about their overall tenure. And it's gotten better. There are a couple of playoff appearances the last 5 or 6 years, but the growing pains are way more than they thought. And every once in a while, he'll mention something like, well, in the business world, you can bring in new people all the time or whenever. There's no calendar. He goes, that's not how it works here. Like there's a limited window when you can change your coach or GM or whatever. And then you have all these other factors, right? People fighting for the same person. And so it's a different world than he was used to. And I think it's probably a lot, I don't know. I think it's a lot harder to succeed in the NFL than it is when, you already have a giant conglomerate corporation that he's running.
Besides the stadium, which we can hit at the end, anything else from the Haslams that you wanted to touch on?
Well, real quick, the domestic violence, right, has been a theme with the Quinshon Junkins.
Oh, yeah, right.
They've had 3 guys arrested on after domestic incidents within the last year. So they all express regret that happens. They don't love, they don't like talking about it. They're trying to see if they screwed something up in their vetting process or the vetting process wasn't thorough enough, but they don't really feel like it. They feel like these came out of nowhere with these 3 players. So that's a focus. They're going to obviously try to get better at that and, not have that happen again with any of their players. But I did think it was newsworthy that he said he expects Quinshon Junkins to sign and play, which he's unsigned still, right? So we don't know how that's going to play out. They are going to let the legal system, the case work its way through the legal system a little longer before they sign, if and when they sign Junkins. But he said that he does believe he'll play for the Browns, adding he's cautiously optimistic.
All right, Scott. So we're kind of transitioning here, and that was going to be one of my next topics. You brought up Junkins, and what Haslam had to say about him, and when it kind of, you were talking more so of how it looks team wise, and do they have an issue with guys like this? And then you touched a little bit about where he goes from here. But what are you gathering from camp about his status? When are we going to see him? He hasn't signed his contract. Where are we at with Quinshawn?
Yeah, Chud, I don't have a great answer for that. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. It- They're waiting. The team's waiting for more clarity from a legal situation, and I haven't seen any updates yet. I need to check back in on that, but there hasn't been anything in the last week or so. The only update I got from the Fort Lauderdale police, I want to say it was this week sometime, was that they released more of the redacted incident report, and Quinshon Judkins' girlfriend, who's the alleged victim in this situation, did tell police that this wasn't the first time there had been incidents. But she said they'd never risen to this level. But with that, if that's true, then you look at it like, okay, this wasn't just an isolated incident, which we didn't know. So I just think that's another piece of the puzzle that we need to think about. But as far as when he might be back with practice, I think it feels like we're waiting for the courts to do something, to act in some way before the Browns think about whether or not they want to sign him, because he can't come in till they sign him. And then once you sign him, there's a commitment there. So I don't think the Browns want to sign him and then be blindsided by a new revelation or a maybe more a more serious charge or whatever could happen in the legal process. So it feels like it's on hold to me. And I also would say that my expectation would be, and again, I don't know all the facts. The league is doing its own investigation. I think it'll all play out, but I would expect him to be suspended by the league. So I don't know if there's a rush to get him back into training camp to get him ready when he might be suspended for the first 5 or 6 games. Now, from a strictly football perspective, he does need to be in pads. He did need to practice. He's missing valuable time there. So I understand that question, and it's a really important question, and it's a concern for the team. But I just feel like it's in a holding pattern, and I don't think this is going to resolve itself anytime soon.
No. Yeah, and we kind of touched on that last time that no matter what happens, it's going to delay the process and it's not going to be great.
Right?
It might end up down the road, maybe down the road, but it looks like it could be a long road anyway. We'll see how that plays out. So how's the running back room looking? I mean, how do the backs look in camp? Should we be concerned here?
Yeah.
Because obviously, the he
Yeah.
was big in their plans.
Right. No, without a doubt, Judd. It is a concern. I think on a couple of levels. Number one is they're going to recommit to the run game. And yes, the offensive line is important in that. Yes, the scheme is important in that. And just the overall commitment is really important. But the running back matters, obviously. And you don't draft a guy number 36 if you're not going to give him a ton of carries and make him your workhorse, right? Make him the man in your run game. So that's a huge loss. Now Jerome Ford, I think, is a quality player, and he will step into that number one role. But they already had Jerome Ford, and they felt like he wasn't good enough, so they went and drafted Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson in the fourth round. So Ford is not perfect. Um, he has home run capabilities, and I talked to him yesterday, and we talked about his mindset and all kinds of things. And he's stepped in for Nick Chubb the last 2 years when Chubb was injured, but they're looking to upgrade. So now you go back to Jerome Ford, and it's not as good as they thought it would be with Quinshon Judkins. And then you'll have Dylan Sampson help Jerome Ford, and you'll have Pierre Strong Jr. in the mix. So it does feel like it'd be more running back committee than just straight up Quinshon Judkins getting 22 carries a game, which might have happened if he were here from day one, or I guess it could still happen, but I don't think that's a possibility, or I don't think that's the likelihood. So, yeah, I think they're going to have to rely on multiple guys to get the job done. They're going to have to lean on that offensive line to create the holes, because if the holes are there, then Jerome Ford can run through them. But it's not going to be as clean as it would have been with, the guy you take number 36. So I do think, you talk about this team and the expectations aren't that high and they need to overcome some things. And when you start taking away what were going to be the strengths, or at least chipping away at what were going to be the strengths, then that's concerning. And I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I'm gonna. We talk about defense, and this team is going to rely on defense and the run game. Well, the run game took a hit with Quinshon Judkins, his situation. The defense, yeah, JOK, and we've known that for a while that he's going to be out all year. Then Jordan Hicks unexpectedly retires at the start of training camp, and he was your middle linebacker. And Martin Emerson Jr. ruptures an Achilles tendon on Tuesday in practice, right? So you have all this happening, and it's a knock on, or it's blows to what are supposed to be the strengths of your team.
Yep. Well, Scott, that leads us right into the next topic. And, the Junkins gives you the drama aspect that we were staying away from up until then. But the other thing you hope to stay away from is injury. We talked about Pickett earlier, and, that seems to be minor, we hope, at this point. But, boy, what a huge loss with Emerson. You just brought him up, and injuries are definitely showing themselves here in Berea early.
Yeah, and it happens, and I know fans don't want to hear that, and I know the team doesn't want to see it. You're going to lose guys, but when you lose guys early, it hurts, and when you lose guys at a key position like corner, it hurts, and when you lose one of your best guys, it hurts, right? So it doesn't mean they can't recover from it, and teams do it all the time, but it is a blow, and I think with Emerson, what sticks out with him, Chud, is he had two really good first 2 years, right? Third-round draft pick in 2022, played well as a rookie, played really well in 2023 as part of that number one defense. I thought he was borderline Pro Bowl. He thought he deserved Pro Bowl consideration, so did his teammates, like Pro Bowl nod. And then last year he wasn't as good, and he gave up some deep plays. He's a bigger guy, so sometimes he struggles with the quicker receivers. He just didn't have a great year. And when we talked to him and talked about timing, we talked to him Tuesday morning, and then the injury happens Tuesday afternoon. He was so excited and talked about how he had nagging injuries last year, and they affected him, and he played through them. He hasn't missed a game for injury throughout his career, said he's never had surgery, but he had some injuries that affected his play. He just thought his body wore down, so he committed himself all offseason. Got in the weight room. He said he added 6 pounds of muscle, got stronger, and then he's just trying to turn and run with Deontay Johnson on a deep ball in a 7-on-7 drill, and the Achilles goes. I was not far away. It's a rough scene. I mean, you've been out there at a ton of practices, Joe, but there's a rhythm, there's a noise, there's a buzz to a training camp practice, and all of a sudden it stopped. And I think that happens with any serious injury, but it also happens to another level, I believe, with guys that are beloved on their team. And I feel like Martin Emerson Jr., MJ, is one of those guys. So he goes down. He knows it's serious right away. He screamed a couple of F-bombs, throws off his helmet. Greg Newsome comes over. Kevin Stefanski comes over. And you could just tell it was bad. One of the athletic trainers, said, "Hey, maybe it's a cramp," and he's like, "It's not a cramp," but more vocal and with other words in there. So he knew it was bad. He covers his head with the towel when they drive him off the field. So it was just a tough scene, and it got really quiet, right? Like the only noise for a while was him yelling, because it stops practice. A Paul comes over. Then once he's off the field, practice starts up again. But it's just really difficult. And from a on-field perspective, he was going to be your number 2 or your number 3 corner. Greg Newsome II had been working as the number 2 on the outside. And then when they'd go to nickel, and they're in nickel, at least 45%, maybe 55% of the time, Newsome would slide into the slot, and then Emerson would be on the outside. And you like your three corners there. You got Denzel Ward, who's one of the top 5 in the league. You got Greg Newsome, who's in a contract year, trying to prove himself again. And then you have Emerson on the outside trying to bounce back. And he was also in a contract year, which stings. You talk about all these different layers to the injury. He was trying to prove himself worthy of a long-term contract, whether here or elsewhere, in the final year of his deal. And now he's not going to get that opportunity. So he probably doesn't sign a long-term or a multi-year deal anywhere, I would think, this offseason. Maybe the Browns bring him back on a 1-year prove-it deal. Maybe he goes somewhere else. I mean, you're talking a 6 to 8 month rehab. So it's a really difficult spot, professionally, financially, for Martin Emerson. And then from the Browns, it'll probably be Newsome stays on the outside as your number 2 corner. Cameron Mitchell, Miles Harden will get looks at nickelback. In this league where teams pass the ball all the time, you need a lot of corners. You need a lot of good corners. And the Browns now are missing one of their top 2 or 3 guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to echo that, what you said. That's the one position now I feel like in the NFL you need a lot of depth in. And is that it is a big deal. So that's a big blow. Any other injuries? Just kind of maybe all this together. Any other injuries? Plus we have the Jordan Hicks news and also a couple signings.
Yeah, not a ton of injuries, Chud. Let's see, we have Jerome Ford is back. He missed the start of camp with a minor injury. He's back. Was in team drills. We mentioned Jordan Hicks. Yeah, I mean, he started 12 games at middle linebacker last year, was coming back to do it again. But I think he's 33, 34 years old. Decided he wasn't going to do it. And believe it caught the Browns off guard. They were counting on him. We mentioned you lost JOK, so now you're down your top 2 linebackers from last year. Now, I will say Carson Schlesinger, and I mentioned it up top, the rookie out of UCLA, the number 33 pick, has looked really good. He's been impressive. So he fills one of those spots, which is critically important. He's been calling plays for the linebackers, which is rare for a rookie. And he was starting to do that when Hicks wasn't here. Now, because Hicks, was considering retirement those first couple of days, and he retired. So Schlesinger continues to do that. It means more playing time for Devin Bush and Mahmoud Diabate. It opens up maybe a guy like Winston Reed or Nathaniel Buki Watson. They can get some reps at linebacker. So that hurts. The Hicks retirement hurts from a depth, from an experience, from a leadership standpoint. And I thought he was a guy that might lose reps during the season if one of the young guys emerged, but he was going to be a steadying force early on. Michael Woods II had a hand injury, so they waived him with an injury designation. And, he's never been able to really stay healthy. He had an Achilles a couple years ago. Hasn't been really productive when he did get limited snaps. But in a receiver core that doesn't have a lot of depth, there was a chance he was going to make this team. So that's an injury. Tevin Jenkins, a backup offensive lineman, is out there, but he's not doing anything, but he's just working through something. Same with Grant Delpit, the safety. He's out there every day, but not doing team drills, not doing much. He's working through something. But I would say that those are the biggest injuries. And obviously, the Emerson one. The other ones feel more like, day-to-day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's hit a couple players real quick. You had brought up Deontay Johnson earlier, Scott. I mean, are we about him? Do we not know yet? What's the deal there?
Yeah, it's interesting, Chud. I talked about receiver. They really could use Deontay Johnson to be. He didn't have to be the Pro Bowler he was in Pittsburgh, but just a productive, reliable target for whoever's playing quarterback. Add him to Cedric Tillman. Add him to Jerry Jeudy. I thought Johnson had a really slow start to camp where, I don't know if it was 3 days in, I said, I haven't seen him make a play. And then he started to come on. He started to show up. That could be, for a guy that wasn't in a lot of the offseason program, maybe it's getting some comfort level with the system with the playbook. Could also be getting in better shape as we get into, the second week of training camp. But he started to show up. I remember he caught a red zone touchdown from Shadur Sanders. Then I saw him catch another couple passes the next day. I mentioned, he got by Emerson on that one ball where Emerson got hurt. And he's just continued to make a play or two a day, which I think is a really good sign because and he still is a question mark, but I think he entered camp as a giant question mark, even within the organization, where they didn't know if he's going, and I still don't know if he's going to make the team, but it was that big a uncertainty where, I mean, there's a chance that he becomes the number 2 receiver, and there's also a chance he gets cut. And we don't know how that's going to, right? We don't know how it's going to go play out, but we've seen some positive steps over the last few days.
Okay. Let's not spend a ton of time on this, but let's talk about Myles Garrett.
Chud.
Touch on him quickly. We spent a lot of time on him last time.
It's first of all, the reception was great for him. I was wondering about that. Nothing to notice there, right? He's still throwing the ball into the stands with the fans, still signing autographs, getting big cheers. So there was nothing there. And I just I'm saying what everybody knows, but he is so good. And when you see these team drills and the first time in pads, and he just dominates where it's almost impossible to block him. And he could single-handedly wreck practices where, then he veers off so he can continue the play. But if they just let him go and said it's a sack, the offense might not complete a pass for stretches because he's that quick into the backfield.
Wanted to know is wasn't there, and we had talked a lot about the reception would be okay, and it all was well there, right?
Yeah, nothing to report. Same old. Still beloved by the fans coming out to training camp.
Who's standing out? You've already mentioned a few people, but just a moment to talk about who's standing out.
I mean, I'm just going to re-emphasize Carson Schlesinger, the linebacker. Makes plays. He blew up Dylan Sampson on a run in a drill the other day, knocked him off his feet. He looked good in a special teams drill I was watching yesterday. So you got Schlesinger. Denzel Ward always looks good. Makes plays every day. I thought Greg Newsome got off to a good start in training camp, which is important given the Martin Emerson injury. Caden Davis, Chud, is my last guy for you. Caden Davis, he's a receiver, kind of like they call him a first-year guy. Didn't play really much as a rookie, but he's not a rookie. He's been around during the offseason. I see him make a play or two every day. And again, for a receiver core where you got Jerry Jeudy and you got Cedric Tillman and Jamari Thrash. I think those 3 guys are locks to make this roster. After that, I don't know if there's another lock. DeAndre Carter probably has a spot, but he's also the return guy. So, does he count against the receivers, if they keep 5 or 6? I think Caden Davis has a chance to sneak onto this roster.
All right, we'll have to remember that. We'll mark that down, Scott. We'll revisit that here where rosters are set. The camp would look under Stefanski. Any major changes? I know a lot of talk out there.
Yeah. I think I'm glad you brought this up, Chud, and I wrote about it yesterday. We talked about toughness and increased toughness and increased intensity was what they were going for in this camp. And the best example, and we've seen examples, and I think the intensity has been at a higher level. It just feels different. It feels different than last year's camp, which felt slow, and the ramp-up period is really long. And part of that was, Deshaun Watson coming off the shoulder and managing his reps. But the cadence was different. The feel of it was different. The urgency was different. It's been much better this year. But then to take it to another level, they tackled in practice on Wednesday. And Kevin Stefanski has never had tackling in a practice since he got here in 2020. So that's a big change. And it was funny. We're watching practice. We watch all these practices. We watch every rep. And there's a it's a team drill, so it's 11 on 11, and there's a run, and I think it's Dylan Sampson gets tackled. But, sometimes guys go to the ground. You don't know if it's a tackle or a guy slips or it's a big hit and he falls. You never know. And then the second play, it was kind of the same thing. And then the third play was an obvious tackle. And I said, oh my gosh, they are tackling. And then it was the rest of the drill. And it just, everything ratchets up when you tackle. Now, you still got to be careful. Nobody touches the quarterbacks. You don't want guys piling on. You don't want cheap shots, any of that. But it says we are going to be more physical. We're going to try to be ready week 1 and for this early stretch of the season. We need to, they keep saying, callous their bodies, callous their toughness, callous their mental toughness. And Kevin Stefanski thought it was important enough to take this next step in this huge departure. And after years of trying to manage bodies and get everybody to week 1 healthy and get you through 17 games, he said, no, we have to do something. We have to make such a drastic change to jumpstart us, right? To kind of switch the mentality. And we saw that with the live tackling. I don't know how often they'll do it. We talked to Stefanski before practice, so we didn't get to talk to him about that. But my guess is they'll do it more than once, and the players loved it. Now, I don't know if they did it every day or if they did it every period but I think they liked the change, and it plays into this new attitude we're talking about. The staff is walking around with these shirts say "Heart and Toughness." It's a really intentional approach this year, and tackling was just, it just showed you that they mean, that they're being serious about this.
Do you have one of those shirts, Scott?
I don't. Nobody offered me one, Sean.
No one. But I got to tell you, though, so that's why a lot of people out there, they're in for that, clickbait. Who had this predicted on the last pod? If you just listen to this pod and read your articles, you would have known that there would be something like this that happens because you say they need to get tougher.
Right.
The team had to have toughness. You called it, my man, and there you go.
Well, I appreciate that, Chad. I wasn't sure that they would do the tackling. I knew that they would do things to be more physical. I wasn't sure he would go the full step to tackling. So I would say I was a little surprised at that. And again, I don't even know, there's so much good buzz about it yesterday. And like I said, the players embraced it. I don't think necessarily tackling to the ground is what separates the great team from the good team, or I don't know if that gets you to the Super Bowl. I think you can do it either way, and I think teams have success doing it either way. This just felt like a good time in the organization, for the organization, and in this regime's tenure, right? We talked about this being a key year. They're trying to show that last year was a fluke and learn from last year's mistakes. I think that's the most important thing. Learn from last year's mistakes. And to add tackling, if Stefanski stays and they don't do it again next year, that wouldn't be a surprise to me. I just think at this point in time, it does make sense.
Yeah. Speaking of, if you're going to take a picture, fall into the water. That wasn't you.
It wasn't me. And you're talking about the brown helmet reveal on the lake, and it was such a hoax. The guy following the thing was such a hoax. I do not believe that was real for 1 second. But it got a lot of publicity, so I guess it served its purpose.
You don't think that was real, huh?
I do not. No.
No.
I do not. Nope. So, Jeb,
what do you think about that?
I don't know. It's
the brown helmet.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. I'm not a huge uniform guy. I don't spend a ton of time thinking about it. But my first impression was it looks kind of cool. And if they're going to go with the entire brown jersey, so it's brown jerseys, brown pants, brown helmet. I think it's got a chance to look pretty sharp. I like that it's got some orange in the helmet still. I don't think you can go all brown, then you look like the fudgesicle. So I think there's enough orange in there to balance it. But just, I haven't seen it live. I've only seen the pictures of it, but I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to hit you with, and we've spent enough time talking about the stadium, but Haslam's what, 99.9% sure
Yeah.
that it's going to Brook Park.
Yeah, and I'd been hearing that that they feel that confident about it. But, when you hear the owner say it, I think that's important. Um, and when they got to $600 million from the Ohio budget, from the unclaimed funds, that put them over the edge. That said, okay, we're going to be able to finance this. They're still trying to get $300 million, give or take, from the county. If they can't work it out with the county, then they'll probably go to private investors. But they feel like they can fill that gap. The $600 million from the state, if they didn't get that, then they were going to have to maybe go back to the drawing board or just stay at the lakefront. They were going to have some big decisions to make. But they got the $600 million from Ohio, and so now it becomes, what are the questions? The question's the final piece of the funding, but they believe that they're going to find a way to do that. And that's on them, so that's good. Then you have a couple of lawsuits remain. And the Haslams feel completely confident that the Modell lawsuit won't hold up. And I think they're right, especially after the Ohio legislature changed the Modell lawsuit, like the Modell law during the budget talks. It just changed. I think that strengthens the Haslams case. And then there's a lawsuit out there that Jimmy said he couldn't talk about. State government had to talk about it. But somebody's suing, saying you can't take money from the unclaimed funds and use it for stadium purposes. But they're confident that that's not going to hold up in court either. So they plan to begin the new stadium construction. He said they'll start stuff at the end of this year. They hope to break ground in February. So yeah, I mean, I would say all full steam ahead for 2029, Chud. And we're going to follow the story, obviously, and there's going to be a ton of angles to it, and we're going to watch it get built and all that, and it's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to be cool. I think there's an adjustment period for those people that don't think it's a good idea. For those people who still think it should be downtown, it's going to take some time, but I think eventually, and the Browns are still going to play at the stadium for the next 4 years, so the transition can be slow, but at some point when you start to see this structure go up in Brook Park, I think there's a chance where it switches from I don't want it to be there to this is kind of cool, and let's see if it can. They think it's going to be transformative. Let's see if it is. Let's see if they get 50 events a year, and Taylor Swift comes, and a Final Four comes, and maybe a Super Bowl, right? I mean, we're talking down the road, but that is the vision that they have. And I think once you actually see the building start to go up and the stuff around the building, then it's going to feel more like reality. And then the next piece of it, and the last thing I want to say about it is what happens on the lakefront. And the Haslams would not commit to paying for the demolition of the current stadium and what their role in the lakefront development is going to be. And they remain open to being part of that, and they've been in the discussions for years about how the lakefront was going to be developed, stadium or no stadium. And then obviously there's been a rift with the city and with the mayor, Cleveland mayor, Justin Bibb, and I think that needs to be repaired. I think the Haslams should be involved in lakefront development. I think they should give money in the lakefront development. I hope and believe that it'll eventually get there. But what's interesting to me is they offered to pay for the demolition. And this is when they were trying to get the city's support as they tried to get the money from Ohio. And then once they got the money from Ohio, they didn't need the city's support anymore. My point is, if you're willing to pay for the demolition of the stadium then, you should pay for it now. And it becomes too political then. You're trying to hurt Mayor Bibb, when paying for the demolition of the stadium, the money's not going to Bibb. The money that the city would save from paying for the demolition goes to the taxpayers. It goes to schools. It goes to other places, right? So I think I understand the Haslam's frustration, but I think everyone would be better served if they rose above that and said, yes, this is better for Northeast Ohio, and we're taking a major tenant out of downtown. Let's see how we can make the city as whole as possible. And I do have confidence that it'll get there. I'm just a little, I don't know, annoyed maybe that it has to go through all these delays and fighting to get where it should be anyway, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, that's it for me, unless you got anything else.
No, I appreciate it, Chud. It's good to talk to you. I'm glad you had a little family time on vacation last week, but now we're in the grind, buddy. You got to be ready for these.
I know. I appreciate you giving me the time off. I really do. We did a little staycation with the family. You know, there's down the, you know, I know everyone does this, but there's so much to do here,
Yep.
and every day we were doing something. So it's what's really weird about it, Scott, is to go on vacation and I wasn't on vacation during all of camp, but it was when Browns camp started. Very weird because my entire been covering that on a daily basis, right? So, like, you know, I still cover the Browns, but not like you do. So it's very weird to have a day off and see camp news going across social media. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, like you couldn't imagine that.
I could. I know. I just flashed through my head that is there going to be
that's your world,
right? I mean, someday I assume that's going to be the case. But yeah, that's interesting, buddy. Yeah, I get you. That is weird for sure. So, all right, bud. I appreciate
love doing this though, and keep it up. And I'm sure we'll.
Yeah, we'll talk next week, and we've got a preseason game next week. Next
right.
Friday night, right? Next Friday night, Carolina. So we'll
Carolina.
Yeah, we'll preview that next week sometime. We'll talk about who's going to play quarterback. They have a joint practice down in Carolina Wednesday, off Thursday, and then play Friday. So, yeah, we got football to watch. And the last thing I'll say is it should be fun. We should get a lot of look at the rookies, right? I would expect to get a half of Dylan Gabriel and a half of Shadur Sanders is what I would expect. Kevin Stefanski hasn't said that, but that's what I'd expect. And that makes a preseason game worth watching. There's going to be a lot to dissect. So we'll get into that next week. Thanks as always, Chud. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.